Welcome to Fight News Now. I'm your host, John Pollock. Coming up over the next hour, we are going to take a look back at all of the action that went down over the past weekend with a big focus on the UFC Fight Night event from Ottawa, Ontario. And that is where we are sending you, as John Ramdeen and Robin Black were covering all of the action, and we send it off to them.
What's going on, everybody? John Ramdeen and Robin Black with you here. This is Fight News Now, and as you can see in the background, it is the capital of Canada. We were here for UFC Fight Night that went down at the TD Place in downtown Ottawa. The main event, Rory MacDonald and Stephen Thompson battling it out over 5 rounds, and there were some boo birds, but I think they just didn't understand how tactical of a battle it was. Two guys at the highest level that couldn't afford to make any mistakes. You got to see risk, you got to see pain, you got to see damage. I talked to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson afterwards, and he couldn't even shake my hand with his right hand because of the damage. He could barely walk, and I'm sure there are people at home going, how is that possible? Because we didn't see a whole lot of crazy action.
Well,
I mean, we did.
Yeah, I mean, if you take those 25 minutes and what you have is a dramatic push and pull between goals. I want to get away from you, but more importantly, I want to draw you, get you to chase, get you to hunt, and catch you. Rory knows he can't do that, and he needs to pressure, but he needs to get in. And that dynamic was at play. I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. A wonderful, special fight. But if you take the 25 minutes and you make yourself a 4-minute highlight reel, there were some incredible things, but there's a real tight tension throughout a fight like that. And if you're watching it, maybe at home, maybe on TV, you could feel that tension more. Rory's desire to win at all costs, to get in against a guy who getting in is getting hurt.
Stephen Thompson told us that he was surprised how well Rory was able to deal with his movement and to deal with his range, and that he had to make adjustments. So clearly the time training with Raymond Daniels helped Rory MacDonald. We use Raymond Daniels, but because of the amount of time that Rory has spent at the TriStar Gym, we referenced the Kyokushin karate practitioner George St. Pierre, and Chad Laprise is a kickboxer, and John McDessie's a karateka. So he's been seeing these different looks, and I know that Stephen Thompson isn't like those guys, but with that and the addition of Raymond Daniel, I'm not surprised he was able to do as well as he did.
He did very well, in the first couple of rounds, and he talked about it leading into it, and he was you could feel some honesty in it. He's, I can kickbox at range with this guy, and I can do that. And then when I get in and take him I will dominate him on the ground. And that is how he approached it. But in those first 2 rounds of being willing to kick with him, being willing to engage him, what choice do you have? You're at a distance where he can kick you. If you're not going to attack him at that distance, you just give it to him. That's why you have to kick with that kind of kicker. That's why both Ellenberger and Hendricks were destroyed in those fights. Because if you just give him that range, you're done. You must kick with him there. But you must also be able to at least win those rounds or stay in it and use that to get inside. Rory tried, but this guy is that good. There's a movement, we call it the movement, where this is the game you have to beat. And if you can't, Dominic Cruz will destroy you. Stephen Thompson will destroy you. Mighty Mouse is playing elements of this game. You must find an answer for it. And Rory tried to stay at distance and then use the moments to get inside. And when he couldn't, he's tried new ways. Comes in behind his big shield. He rolled for knee bars. He tried takedowns, he even pulled guard. Yeah. And none of it worked because Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is that good.
The UFC announced that they're heading back to Vancouver. However, I have a feeling that they will be making a return to the nation's capital. The fans in Ottawa, they're simply amazing. We were there for the very first fight, Bagatinov and Herrera, and it was basically 85% full. The fans were into it. They were cheering, and it just got progressively louder and louder. Of course, the Steve Bosse fight blew the roof off of the place. But were you expecting what you saw in Ottawa?
Yeah, I mean, the UFC does new very well, because by the time you get, if you've been a fan for 3 years or 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, you've just been dying for it to come, So they were lit. They really were. And we were outside the fan village. There were people everywhere there. And thanks for all the love, people. It really means a lot to us, the people that are watching Fight Network. And it was great. The vibe was insane. And that, outside it was 25 degrees, and inside it was 30 degrees and sweaty and wet and smelly. And in a weird kind of way, that almost lit the fuse even hotter.
When you look at the co-main event, Patrick Cote, Donald Cerrone, I think a lot of people, not that they were forgetting, But sometimes we forget
Yeah.
just how good Donald Cerrone is because of how casually he seems to approach the game of mixed martial arts. We've talked to many trainers, we've talked to the highest level of fighters, and they said this is not a sport where you can dip your feet into. You have to jump in head first into the deep end of the swimming pool. However, Donald Cerrone gives off the vibe that he just sticks his toe in. Once he's done training, he leaves for the day. He does not think about it. He does not obsess about his opponents. However, we get to see the performance that we had from him on Saturday night. Leads me to believe that that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, these guys also, we talked about it on 5 rounds, you know, they tell lies because there's good value in it. You can mislead the opponent, you can mislead the audience, you can sell fights, you can make money. You know, we can't count on, I wouldn't tell the truth if I was a professional athlete. Why would you? You would use that platform to shape things the way you need it, and that's what they do to a certain degree. But having said that, you know, Michael Bisping talked about the disadvantage of being so focused, feeling that roller coaster of emotions leading up to the fight, overtraining because he's overdriven. We saw how good he looked when he took the middleweight title. Now, I don't think most guys will say they'd like to roll off the couch with 2 weeks out, having drank beer the week before, although Donald probably drank beer the night before. But there is something to these guys of when they're focused on fighting, they're focused on fighting for those 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week. And when they're not, they're not. They're being complete people. They're learning other elements of the world. They're learning other things, because being over-focused on your opponent, sometimes you end up so hyper-focused that you can't perform. Donald performed. Donald went in there and he had as clean and confident a performance as we've ever seen from him.
The 170-pound division constantly changing, just like the sport of mixed martial arts, constantly evolving. It's going to be Robbie Lawler taking on Tyron Woodley for the 170-pound strap. Stephen Thompson says, I want the winner of that. When you look at some of the guys in the top 10, is there anybody that will be able to handle what Stephen Thompson brings to the table?
The hardest fight for Stephen Thompson is Carlos Condit. And that is because of the nature of how their attributes and their skills and their understanding and the feel of their game match up. Stephen Thompson is in play to beat Robbie Lawler and to beat, also, of course, Damian Maia, because Damian Maia, although obviously he needs to get in, he has a super deceptive timing and smooth rhythm to be able to get in. Might not do it, and if he doesn't do it, he gets spin kicked unconscious, but he has ways to do it. But Carlos Condit's complete game, he's a mover, he's a fluid guy, and not only does that allow him to engage and play in that game, but it allows understanding. You know, when you watch somebody hold a microphone and talk about fighting on TV, you understand what they're doing, you do that. And that's true. People who are engineers watch other engineers work. This guy has specialties in the same realm as Thompson, so not only does it allow him to play with him, but it allows him to understand him on other levels, and he has a full skill set. So Carlos Condit is the guy who has the best chance, in my opinion, to beat Stephen Thompson.
Patrick Cote, a losing effort against Donald Cerrone. I know there's going to be a lot of people out there saying it's time for Patrick Cote to hang up the gloves. He never needed to do this. At this stage of his career, he wanted to get in the cage against a very dangerous Donald Cerrone, because this is what he loves to do. When you have a flat performance like that, and I'm sure Patrick Cote is going to be very critical of his performance. Of course, we all have to credit Donald Cerrone because he played his game. What does that make a fighter think when you have a performance like that, even though you feel that I'm the best I've ever been?
Yeah, you will often, not comment as much as, the internet will say, oh my God, this guy needs to retire.
Yeah.
They'll say, we see it every single show. People just, the overreaction to a single bad performance or a single bad moment. This one is slightly different because Pat is so intelligent and he's got such a full life, and he's said many times to us, he doesn't want to be in there 1 or 2 fights too many. So he's going to ask himself if this was one of those. And he's going to ask himself very honestly. He's a super honest guy. What did he say to you after? You overheard him saying, hey, I lost a fight.
Yeah.
And that's true. But causation and correlation, how do they work in this fight? How do they work in this performance? He's going to ask himself, he's going to look for truths in that. And what he finds is, maybe I'm right at the point where I'm going to do that, then he'll stop. And if he says, I might not be, and I still love this, let's go see if I can have a killer performance next time, then he won't stop. And Pat's one of these highly intelligent guys, highly evolved guys. He'll do the right thing, whatever it is.
I know that there's always comparisons between boxing and mixed martial arts, but I think one of the advantages of mixed martial arts is that there's life after losing. Where boxing can be very damaging for a fighter who's won 20 or 30 fights and they suffer their first setback. It can mess with them mentally. Patrick Cote's lost fights before. He's lost 3, he's lost 4, he's lost close to 10 fights. But I think because of the way that he fights and because of the fans' support, he gets to say, yeah, it's just a fight. If it's the worst thing that happens is that I lost a fight, that's just the way this game goes.
Yeah, and I think there's a very good chance he'll do that. And if he goes and fights again or more or a few more times or a lot of more times, it's because he wants to, and that's the best way to be doing it. There's lots of talk of George St. Pierre coming back. We've heard stories that there are conversations being had even about it, trying to fight Michael Bisping for that title. And George is rich and successful, and he has other things in his life, and if George is coming back, it's because he wants to fight because of his love of competition in the martial arts. That's when guys should be in there. There are the realities, it's sad realities that sometimes that's not the case. Guys need the money, or they don't know what else to do with their life or whatever. But in Pat's case, in George's case, and Steve Bosse's case, I think if they're doing this, it's because of their love of it.
We continue to talk about the 170-pound division. You talked about George St. Pierre, who's thinking about moving to 185 pounds. Do we have a new player at the welterweight limit in Donald Cerrone? When you look at his skill set and his evolution, how does he match up with some of the guys ranked in the top 5?
He's unique, eh? Like, he has built a career of the skills necessary to fight, and then he's developed the ability to perform at a high level with those skills on a day's notice. And that's unique. And after seeing how he handled Pat, not only using toughness and skill, but smarts. Those takedowns early was the difference. It changed the dynamic of that fight. That was smart, very smart. And so he's in play against any of these guys. Would you want to see him fight Robbie Lawler?
Yeah. I would love to see. There's so many great fights for Donald Cerrone on the horizon. That is it.